Hey guys, I'm Coach Kassem and I am standing between two Prime Prodigy HLP series racks. Now, the HLP stands for high-low pulley. So you'll notice that these racks have an integrated adjustable pulley across the front as well as a pull-down pulley that comes out across the top. So you have a ton of versatility with these racks, and they also come with a variety of options and a ton of attachments. So my goal today is to kind of walk you through this family of racks so that you can decide which one of these might be the best solution for you. So to start off, let's talk about the racks that are physically next to me, because these already have some of those options and features included, and those may be of interest to you. One of them being the difference in height. You'll notice that this one is taller than this one, and actually both of these are taller than the standard lowest height that you can get. And that's because I have an optional extension on them. So this rack here is set to be 10 inches higher than standard, and this one here 5 inches higher than standard. So to give you guys reference, I'm about 5'9" with pretty short arms, and this allows me to basically have to reach to touch that top carabiner. So if I was setting this up for me personally and I wasn't limited by ceiling space, this is probably where I would go. If I was taller, I was working with taller athletes, basketball players or whatnot, I may go with that full 10-inch extension. If you are trying to put this in a basement somewhere where you had clearance issues, then going with the standard height is likely going to get you just under what would be a standard ceiling height in a home. So you have a variety of height options. Now, one thing to consider with that height option is not just that it changes the height of the pulley, but you'll also see that there are pull down stations. So this has a width adjustable pull down station with integrated rotate handles that can articulate. It's an awesome pull down station, but the height extension also gives you the opportunity to raise that. So if you're worried about ground clearance for whoever's using this rack on pull-ups, then you could go with the extension there as well. It's not just going to give you the ability to move the actual pull down station, but it also gives you the ability to move the pull up station as well. Now, the other extremely obvious difference, you see here, we have a weight cage. Over here, we don't. We have Olympic plates. So you have two loading options, which is really cool. And it's gonna come down to more than just this doesn't take plates and this does, but there's gonna be some feature differences as well. So first off, this includes an integrated 350-pound weight stack, and you just move the pin to adjust it, which gives you very convenient adjustment of resistance, and you don't need any extra plates. That being said, that is a lot more steel, so there is a little bit more of a cost to having the integrated weight stack versus using the version here that is plate loaded, where you're essentially using regular Olympic plates that you would use on a barbell or anything else. So this system here, you can use existing weight, save a little bit of money. Here you have a little bit more convenience, and that's going to be the first difference in these two setups. The other one is going to be that there's actually a feature difference in terms of cable ratio. And if you're not familiar with cable ratio is, let's walk through that really quick, because most machines have this and you probably never even knew it. So what a cable ratio refers to is essentially how much work is being done at this end of the pulley. So like how much work I actually have to exert at the handle versus what's going on with where the resistance is. So normally, if you just had a rope tied to something and around a pulley, if you pulled it, you'd be pulling the same amount of weight that was on the other end, and it would move the same distance. But what we find in resistance training is if it's a 1-to-1 ratio like that, it tends to be jerky, it tends to be very, you're limited in terms of how refined you can load that. You have to move in larger increments, etc. So most machines will have like a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio where you're moving less load out at the cable end than you are at the resistance end, or the handle end versus the resistance end. So the standard base for these is going to be a 2-to-1 ratio, and what that means is that whenever I happen to be pulling here, I'm only doing half of what the resistance is there. So essentially right now there's two plates on there, but I'm only doing a 45-pound row per se. If I was to set the weight stack at 100 pounds and do that same thing, I would only be doing half of that, 50 pounds in that row. So cable ratio allows you to have, we'll say, a smaller starting point. So whatever the lightest weight that you can put on there, it allows you to work at a fraction of that. It also helps decrease the momentum of the stack. So basically, it's not only half the load, but that means that the weight actually moves half as far, and that allows the motion to be a little bit smoother. So A big difference is going to be is that if you choose the stacked version with the selectorized version, you can choose between a 2-to-1 and a 4-to-1 ratio. So either of those, and it's fixed, it stays there. With the plate loaded, you can actually switch between 2-to-1 and 4-to-1 with a little pin at the bottom of the carriage. So it gives you the flexibility to use a variety of cable ratios. Now, in terms of that, let's talk about why you would choose one or the other, or why you would really want that flexible option. So the higher the ratio, the less peak load that you will get. So basically, if this is set at a 2-to-1 ratio, that means the heaviest load that can come out of this cable is half of 350 pounds or 175 pounds. If it is a 4-to-1 ratio, that means the heaviest load that can come out of this cable is 87.5 pounds, right? So it's a quarter of that 350 pound weight stack. So that's the maximum you get. So depending on how much load you need to use, the exercises that you're going to do, you may want to opt for the lower cable ratio so that you can have enough load. In this version, you don't have to worry about that because you can adjust it for when you need more load, or you can go to the 4-to-1 ratio, which the 4-to-1 ratio is going to give you a smoother feel, it's going to give you a lower starting weight, and it's going to be overall less momentum. So to illustrate that, if I can with this load here, if I jerk this, you can see I can make just a bit of a bounce with that 2-to-1 ratio. So if I was doing very aggressive training, the momentum in there is going to make the movement a little less smooth. It's going to have a bit of a jerk at that transition. If I were to come in here and adjust this to its 4-to-1 setting, so now I've also made this lighter, but also the stack doesn't move as much. So now even if I jerk it, that transition is smooth. So having that higher ratio, because you have leverage there and it's moving less, makes the motion feel smoother and less jerky, which gives a really nice feel to the movement, especially in movements like lateral raises and things like that, where you're moving a big arc with a small muscle. That higher ratio can feel really, really nice. For big movements like pull downs, rows, stuff like that, it'll be nicer, but it doesn't make as much of a difference. So if you were choosing, 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 with this, what I would say is first, err on the side of having enough load. So most people using this for a fitness purpose, I would say do a 2-to-1. But if you're in maybe a rehab setting or something like that, or you're working with people that aren't going to need a lot of resistance, or exercises that aren't going to require a lot of resistance, then you may opt for that 4-to-1 ratio because it's going to have that smoother feel and you're going to have easier transitions between the eccentric and concentric of your exercises. So that's the pulley ratios, or the cable ratios. So this one, you get both no matter what, okay, because you can adjust it. This one you have to choose between 2-to-1 or 4-to-1. And I'll just reiterate that for most people using this from a fitness perspective, you're probably going to go to 2-to-1, because if you think of it, if the max that comes out of this cable is 87.5, that basically means that if you're a person that rows 45-pound dumbbells and then you're sitting here and you're doing a 2-arm dumbbell, that you're already going to be utilizing the majority of the load. So you probably would want to go to the 2-to-1, which is essentially going to give you twice as much weight to be able to progress through as you get stronger. Okay. The other thing that I will just cover really quick is that the pull-down cable on these is always heavier than the adjustable cable. So basically, if you have this set on a 2-to-1 setting, the top one will always be half of that, so it would be a 1-to-1. So that means that if you have it set so that there's 50 pounds coming out of this one, you'd have 100 pounds coming out of that one. So if this was a 2-to-1 ratio, you'd be able to get the whole 350 pounds out of that pull down. If it was a 4-to-1 ratio, you would get half of that, so you'd be able to get 175 pounds. So in terms of that pull down, 175 pounds is still, a good amount for a lot of people for a pull down. But keep that into consideration. If you want to do pull downs with more than 175 pounds, that's another reason to definitely opt for the 2-to-1 version. And again, if you go plate loaded, you can adjust it, you have that versatility. So you can already tell that me being kind of biased towards being able to be fancy in my training, I'm going to go with the plate loaded option probably if I was to have just one of these myself. Obviously, as you see, I have two, but I would go with that so that I basically cover all the bases. I could have the 4-to-1 when I want to, the 2-to-1 when I want to. yeah, you got to put plates on it versus just moving a pin. And trust me, I do really like the look. I mean, it's a very, very appealing looking rack with this nice weight guard on there, weight shield. So really just going to come down to the preferences and the loads that you need there in terms of which of these that you would do. A few other very quick considerations, because I know I'm going long, is this, if you're using this and you didn't actually have a bunch of free weights, you could opt to make this a little bit more, we'll say, you know, economical on space, because you wouldn't have to use the weight horns out here, whereas here you got to have weight storage somewhere if you're going to use plates on the rack. So you could potentially fit this one in a little bit tighter space, because not only do you have to, you know, store these, but you have to get to them. But if this was in a tight space, you would never need to necessarily go out here if you didn't have to access plates. So if you're really constricted in the space that you're putting it in, that may be another reason to consider the Selectorized version. The other thing is that this also does come in a single stack, and what that single stack is it's basically like taking one of these sides off and then putting big feet on it. So a single stack gives you the adjustable pulley, the overhead pulley, and the ability to put all the attachments on it, but essentially what you're going to lose is the ability to use it as a rack for your bench press and your barbell squats and RDLs, that sort of thing, because you only have one column. So unless your balance is like Jedi level, you're not going to be able to rack a barbell on it. So if you just needed the cable station and you just needed a single one, and you were going to use maybe the prime bars to be able to do all your bilateral exercises and have some freedom of movement, you could go with the single stack option and save some space and some cash. So that is another option, and it does come in both of these versions, the plate loaded and the Selectorized version. So that's pretty much the summary of the Prodigy series HLP racks. So watch that again if you need it, but basically no matter what your needs are, one of these racks is going to suit you really, really well and give you a ton of versatility, especially when you consider all of the attachments that you can add to these racks.